from Old Done Monkey to our conversation today. Hey, welcome back.
Hi, good to see you again.
Yeah, 2 days in a row. I hope today is also very uh, fast and busy, and like we have so much to cover and only an hour of IG Live. So we're gonna try our best. But I was letting everybody know that yesterday we have the same conversation but in Spanish, and today we're gonna have the same conversation but in English. So I hope this can be useful. So
Great.
so do you want to start introducing yourself and telling everybody who you are?
Sure. My name is Leanna. So hold on, let me hold this straight. My name is Leanna, and I'm at All Done Monkey, and I've been homeschooling for more than 5 years. I have 3 kids, and 10, 7, and 4 years old. So we're starting to get into some of the older curriculum. I've spent a long time doing younger, no, in a little bit, younger kids. Here's one. Here's my 4-year-old. And we are also trying to do a lot with Spanish. We follow classical education, which I know you're going to be covering a little bit later, what the different types of things are. But we love homeschooling, and I think it's a great alternative whether you're thinking about doing it long-term or you just want to do it until the pandemic is over, until the situation gets sorted with schools. Either way, I think it's a great alternative and can be a really nice way to spend time with your kids and really get to know your kids or to advocate more for them.
Yes, definitely. And actually, that's kind of like the reason we wanted to have this live, to let parents and caretakers in general to know that there are other alternatives to just following just virtual education or public education this year. And like that happened to me. Like, for example, my kids were in public school. They did finish last year in modality of virtual, and they realized that they really like doing their things on their own time. And they asked me to do homeschooling this year. And I have to say, for my family, it was a really great option. And I'm glad that, I had the privilege of being able to be at home because I do work from home to kind of like support them into this year of homeschooling. I don't know if they will be choosing to go back to public school after this. We don't know what's going to happen, to tell you the truth. But what I want to assure persons that are taking care of younger children is that children never stop learning. And that's an assumption that a lot of people think, like, oh, but my child is not going to learn anything if they don't follow a curriculum, or if they don't do these things, or if they don't have a formal teaching setting. And that is a misconception. Children are constantly learning, and it's up to the parents or the mentors in their lives to really offer different arrays of opportunities for them to really start learning. And that's why I wanted to have a IG live on this, because I think a lot of parents are feeling like we don't have a lot of alternatives, and I'm not feeling happy of what my school board is offering. So just wanted to assure everybody that yes, there are other alternatives. Other parents and other families are doing them, and if we can support that in your life, please let us know. And don't feel that you have to do something that doesn't feel right for you and your family or for your children. If your children are not feeling comfortable, if your children are not really being attended the way you want them to be attended, know that there are many ways for them to learn. So you don't even have to be from certain type of family or very, very educated to offer these opportunities to your children. So I wanted to kind of give you like an introduction. We did this yesterday, and I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the different homeschooling settings or philosophies or ways of homeschooling. So there are many ways that people have been doing homeschooling. And I want to mention like a list of, a few that we know of. I'm pretty sure there are many combinations and hybrids everywhere.
Right.
But for example, world schooling. World schooling is a modality of homeschooling where the families will offer traveling as an alternative of teaching. And I think it's a great way, if the family has the privilege of, being able to travel from one place to another. And I'm pretty sure at this moment, around the world is different now that we have the pandemic. But I'm pretty sure there's still a lot of families that are traveling while they're teaching their children. There is that modality, and it's a way that, like hands-on, like going to different places. The children will be offered like a lot of geography and history and actual life.
And just to add in, and I think you mentioned this when we did the live yesterday, if you are somebody who doesn't have the means to travel, or it's just right now because of the pandemic, world schooling is also kind of a philosophy, and you could do it where you are. Just the fact of exploring different cultures. Like I know you and your family are always going to different festivals or events and things like that. So don't think you can't do world schooling just because maybe you don't have the finances or the means to travel, because you can kind of just do that as a way of life. It's a really like you said, a really hands-on way for kids to learn, especially learning about other cultures. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you for offering that tip, because by the way, I mentioned yesterday in our live that I have to remove myself from one of these world schooling groups, because it seems like, like the mentality of some of these people was like, like I have to travel, to Europe or Bali, or, like in order for me to do that or offer my kids like very enriched experiences. Which is not true. Like world schooling is about teaching children about different cultures, different languages, and different ways of living. So it's pretty much like, like offering kids first-hand interactions with their outside world, other cultures. But that is just one, that is out there. Everybody, is definitely welcome to research it. Another modality that there is out there is the word unschooling. And unschooling means the modality of, letting the child lead their own learning. And it's, like non-structured. I'm pretty sure like, like parents can choose whatever way to approach it. I've seen, people doing all kinds of stuff. But I think, it's a great way to also see that, bottom line, what I was saying at the beginning is like, you don't need to have like this color-coded, coordinated living room in your house or room in your house in order for your children to learn. And if that's something that really brings you joy, like Marie Kondo says, do it. But if it brings a lot of stress and anxiety, please don't think like you have to, because like I said, children will learn what they want to learn. So what we want to offer is the opportunities for them to learn. So unschooling is based on that. And actually I have found out that they have amazing organizations that talk about like self-directed learning and autonomous learning. Both of my kids are older now, and I think, that's something that I have noticed. Like, if you just ask your children, like, what are your interests? And what do you think you would like to learn this year? You can definitely offer those experiences for your child that year. Like, I have friends that, their children want to learn how to pilot, and they have found out, like, ways for them to do volunteering at their local airplane place, and they can help. Yes, and actually I learned that you can even start at 5 when you're in high school to become like fly an airplane. And I was like, wow, that's really great. But you can approach it in any ways. Like I also have heard people like their children love horses, so they just start working in a horse place, and they care for the animals. And even though they don't have a horse at home, because not a lot of people have horses, you know, at home, like some people do, but and they can have that experience in their life. So it's a
I
matter.
think I Well, I
Yes.
was just going to say, I think unschooling has a bad reputation for some people because it can look like nothing's happening. And so a lot of people look at it, they don't see, it doesn't look, it's, you know, we talked yesterday about how there are extremes of homeschooling, some where you pretty much recreate a classroom in your home, which is fine. And the other extreme is unschooling, where it doesn't look like school at all. And so a lot of people look at it and think, this is lazy. This is not real homeschooling because they're not doing anything. This is parents' excuse just to not doing school. And to be honest, I actually have known of some families who are like that, who really aren't putting any effort into it and let their kids just watch TV all of the time, and they call it unschooling. Well, that's not really unschooling either. Because unschooling is being self-directed, and it looks very different. But a lot of people have found that a good alternative, especially for kids who don't do well in traditional school and who have had a lot of trouble sitting and focusing in a classroom or doing work that they find to be busy work because it doesn't seem relevant to them. And so if you give them something hands-on, I like it, something hands-on that really matters to them, then a lot of times they can find that joy of learning again, which maybe they've lost, and they can really have a motivation to learn. And you can find ways to tie things into it, you know, because they're really following their passion. So
Yeah, so in that thought, I feel like it's really important to understand. Here's the situation. I feel as a parent that the most important part of any education, it could be in public, private, homeschooling, is really instilling love for learning rather
Right.
than pressuring somebody to learn something that they don't want to learn, period. And I feel like that's the issue with a lot of formal settings where we are thinking about, you know, like control and manipulation, because we think like perhaps if we threaten, you know, the individual, in this case, a child or a young person, for them to learn something that they're not really interested on. I think, you know, that's why a lot of children are not doing well in normal settings. And that's something that we need to really evaluate as parents and caretakers. Like, in which ways do my children learn better? And you were mentioning that yesterday about like how different each of your children are. And that's the same for me. Like each of my children, I have only two, but they learn on their own way in very different ways, and they don't enjoy the same things. Like at this point, I have one that really enjoys doing some things in the computer, and the other one that really needs something hands-on. And you just have to really study your own child and have a good relationship. And that's bottom line. That's why I do feel like a lot of parents don't feel prepared doing education at home, because they don't want to deal with that. And because it's a hard one. It's you know, like, how can I, you know, like, help my child to learn if they're not really wanting to learn? And that is where we need to reevaluate, like, okay, is this something that should be like that? And it can be, like, I wonder, like, if is it better to have like a life learning experience and you know, put the child in that mentality of, you know, learning and get excited about learning? Or do you want them to really, you know, just do what you ask them to do and blindly obey when they're not happy? So I think, you know, those things are something that we just need to evaluate. But that's why I wanted to mention all these different types of, you know, like ways of people doing homeschooling and approaches, because you can choose from a vast array. Like I was going to mention again, like the game schooling. They have like entire curriculums where you use games to learn. So I was mentioning yesterday that you can use Roblox and Minecraft. Like there's an entire class on that. Even my children were telling me the other day, like, they have clubs, mom, and you enter there and they can do different projects, and that is an option if your child is only into games and nothing else work. Why not trying something like that? Like, why not giving them the opportunity? We already have those avenues in learning. Because one more time, it's about really developing love for learning, and rather than, like, you have to do this because, like, otherwise you're not learning. But
and also you don't have to think of I know some people are nervous about having their kids have a lot of screen time. So, I mean, Roblox, Minecraft, that's one avenue, but game schooling can also be board games or other kinds of games. I mean, it's about finding ways to make learning fun. And even though we're not 100% game schoolers, but we use elements of it definitely, like especially with math or something like that, which sometimes kids find a little boring because it's usually sitting and doing worksheets. Well, you can make it into an active game and they can jump as they're doing their even numbers or odd numbers or whatever it is. You can play cards is a great way to practice multiplication. So it doesn't have to be just on screen time, although, screen time, that's fine too, but there's a range of options.
Chess is another board game that a lot of parents love because it develops a strategy thinking.
Right.
I'm not that great on that, and I remember both of my kids, were asking me to teach them, and I was like, well, I can only teach you how to move the pieces, but I think right now we have like a lot of people that are trying to develop more things online as well for support in learning. And that can be something that every parent can access. And yesterday we were talking about like sometimes the issue is access because of the language. But I assure everybody that we want to do something, you will find some ways to do it because you will see that it's worth it. And if it's working for your child, why not doing it? A lot of other families are doing it. You can do it too. So I just wanted to assure everybody that, if there's something that you feel that strongly about because your child needs it, don't give up. Don't think like this is the only way it's going to be. No, because it's not. There are many other ways out there that you can offer to your child at this moment. Thank goodness. At least, in the United States, homeschooling is legal. There are other places in the world where it's not.
Right.
I was talking to somebody in the Netherlands. I think it was she was mentioning saying like, oh, I would have loved to have that option, but in Netherlands homeschooling is not legal. Like you cannot homeschool. So,
or if you're in places like Costa Rica, where my husband's from, I don't know if it's legal, but it's like it would never occur to them. They just don't even get the concept of homeschooling because it's just so far out of the realm of what they do. So if you are doing it, like you don't have as much support as even if it were legal, which I'm not sure, you don't have as much support as you do here. And especially now that so many people are just starting homeschooling, there's so many resources and guides and Facebook groups or people like Mama Tortuga and I that you can ask and talk to and get that kind of support. And don't be afraid that because you've never done it that you can't do it, or if because you're not a licensed teacher or because you've never taught in a classroom like that's fine. A lot of people are doing it that had no previous experience, but your child best. And so that gives you an advantage over anybody else. And there's so much support available that if this is something you want to do, then you'll like you were just saying, you can do it. You can find the resources and find the support. And you may change your mind. Like we're listing all of these options for ways that you can homeschool. You can try them out, and it's not a failure if you try one and decide to do something else. That doesn't mean you made a bad decision. It means that you're finding out what works. You're going to have to try some things. What we started out with, it looks different than what we ended up with now, partly because my kids are getting older. So what worked when they were younger maybe isn't as good a fit now. Like I know you're going to be talking about Waldorf. I really loved Waldorf when they were little, and when they got older, I found that other things worked better. Or you may find that you use elements of one and elements of another. You find what the best mix is for your family. And that's one of the things that's so neat about homeschooling is you do find what works for you. It's all about what works for your family and your child at this point in time. And that may change, and that's okay. And you don't have to beat yourself up about it because it wasn't perfect from the beginning. You know, like you were mentioning those color coordinated rooms and classrooms and things like that. There's a reason they're posting those pictures. Nobody's going to post the picture of not a room that doesn't look great. You know, what you see on social media are the people that want to show it off. And most of us, that's not how our classes work. We do our work at the kitchen table. I don't even have, some people have a separate room they can use as a classroom. We don't have that. One of my kids has desks, the others don't have desks, and it's fine.
Like if you are, you know, if that makes you joyful and, you know, but
Sure.
I can, like, be flexible. And that is actually a tip that I have heard from a lot of, you know, veteran homeschoolers.
Right.
They always tell me that. They're like, no, just be flexible. Be ready, you know, to change your plans at the last minute because
Right.
the kid wasn't into it. Like, you can color code the whole thing and make it beautiful. And I actually have a friend who love creating, you know, like these beautiful lessons for their children and putting them in the table, and they look great, like for a picture. And when the kids will come, they'll be like, nah. And they're like, nah, I don't want to do that. And they will go outside and play, which, by the way, is another way of homeschooling. It's called nature schooling. If you have access to nature or an outside learning environment. And that's something that is very close to my heart because I'm, you know, as Mama Tortuga, I definitely believe 100% that we can learn anything we need from nature. And just by observing, I love, you know, like thinking that everybody can be a naturalist. And we need to teach children, you know, these skills, how, you know, to plant, how to take care of the environment, how to do your own things on, you know, like I love wild skills, you know, like how to start a fire and how to
it's so
take care of
empowering.
yourself. Yes, and both of my kids love it. You know, we have been like very active on those things as a family. And I feel like that's something that is precious and very important to teach every child. But that can be something that you can also do. Like, and you don't need to have like a lot of, you know, like curriculum to do that. But that's another alternative that you have. You can have in your tool belt.
And just to add on to the sorry about nature schooling, another benefit of that, whether you do 100% nature schooling or just letting your kids out to play, there's so many benefits of letting them have unstructured playtime, which they don't get a lot in traditional school. They've really cut back on that a lot because there's so much pressure to get kids to perform well on tests. So I mean, I feel sorry for teachers because they are really under a lot of pressure to get the kids to perform well on these tests, and so the schools have cut back a lot. But if you give them unstructured playtime, it does so much for their imaginations. And, you know, especially now during this pandemic, it's so important to look after their emotional well-being, and giving them unstructured playtime helps a lot with that. And, you know, imaginative play can help them, you know, work through these emotions and things that they're dealing with. And nature does that too. It really helps with emotional self-regulation. It helps them kind of come back to balance and center as a way to unwind. I think a lot of us, and I include myself here, tend to turn to screen time as free time. And that's fine. I mean, we do plenty of it here, but keep in mind that nature is also a great alternative for free time, letting them go outside and play. You know, physically, we're not getting as much activity, so it's really important. But emotionally, it can help them self-regulate a lot more than just playing a video game. You know, you want to have that balance. And what you're doing.
And actually, there's studies that show that humans need to be outside, you know, like to receive the sun rays. And that's an issue. Like, I feel like, you know, like, and I understand, like, I have to say, you know, we are living in a society that a lot of kids do not have access to natural areas, period. Right. And we are
especially now that you can't go to playgrounds a lot, you know.
And we are destroying the few natural areas because most people live in suburban areas or city, you know, like people who do live in country areas are very lucky to have access to those areas. But most children, and it's funny because I live so close to the beach, And I remember the teachers are one of our schools was telling me one year that, you know, a lot of these kids have never visited the beach because their
Mm-hmm.
parents are always busy working, so they don't have the time to take their kids to the beach. And in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, that was mind blowing because I was like, how come they? But yeah, lo and behold, you know, coming from hardworking families, especially if you have to be, you know, from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. work, then you go home, you have to make your shopping, you have to come home, clean, cook.
Right.
By the time, you know, you the end of the day, you don't really have the time to take the kids to the beach. So,
Right.
like thinking about those lines, it's like I have to say, you know, we need to prioritize these things. And I have to say, like for me as Mama Tortuga, it's been like one of my priorities, kind of like, you know, trying to tell
Right.
children that this is also something that is good for them. It's not, you know, like I have people tell me like, oh, but I don't like mosquitoes or I don't like insects.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, but they're also part of nature, you know, like it's not
Right.
like, and you don't have to like them all, but see them as part of the whole. So it's
Right.
not, you know, like, and there are other creatures out there. So I
And you
think
can
that,
find what your kids like. My kids, for example, they get so bored of taking walks. Because that was my husband and I enjoy it. We're always like, let's go on a walk. And they're like, oh, not again. And they drag their feet. They like going for bike rides. That works better. So, you know, you might try different things. If they really don't enjoy something, try something else. And I'm drawing a blank on the name. There's a really nice website that's about wild schooling. If you look into that, that's kind of one version of nature schooling. But she has a lot of their ideas out there. If you don't have access to natural spaces, especially now that so many public places are closed, like if you're in an apartment building, you don't have a yard, you don't have a park nearby you feel like you can go to safely. There are ways you can even bring it inside your home, like get plants.
yes,
You
and
know, make sure
actually,
you
yeah,
have
that's
indoor
something that
plants.
I'm very strong about.
Right. You can do a walk through your neighborhood and have them pick up leaves and acorns and bring those home and have a nature display. You have to work at it, but there are alternatives for that too.
Yes,
I'm sorry, you were
and
going
that's something that it's also, you know, like from a lot of other cultures, you know, I'm pretty sure,
to.
you know, like people who are immigrants in the United States remember, you know, like their grandmas or their aunties that had like a lot of plants inside of the house. Like I'm that auntie. That my house is full of plants, you know, like sometimes, you know, like there are plants that are really good to have indoors. And you can
Right.
even have, like, my children have their own plants, their cacti, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, cacti, and they take care of the cacti, which is minimal care. But I like that they name
That's
them,
good for
and
kids,
you know,
though.
like they have their care for their plant. And
Right.
that's something that is, you know, involving a child in the care of an animal or a plant friend is something
Mhm.
that by itself is learning. You know, like don't
Right.
dismiss that thing as a not learning experience, because it is. It teaches them
Right.
responsibility. It teaches them to keep a schedule. It teaches them so much, like to have feelings and empathy for another living
Mhm.
being. So I will always encourage, you know, like sometimes as parents we are very hard with with ourselves, you know, like I hear parents telling me like all the time, like, oh, it's just that you are doing that and I cannot do that because I, you know, I don't know how to do that. I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
no, everybody, you know, will have their own rhythm. And that's
Mhm.
another thing. I love like the Waldorf
Right.
philosophy in that sense, because they make a lot of emphasis into like I like this book. It's like Seven Times Around the Sun, and it talks about like the rhythm of life. Like how many
Right.
times we don't pay attention to those things. Like children will have their own rhythm. Every age will have their own rhythm. Like you know, the rhythm of a baby. You know, like they will have their
Mhm.
times where they're active. They will have their times as sleepy. And how we need to recognize those things too. Like you know, like the prime times for our children to learn. Like sometimes some kids won't learn at certain time just because you're telling them to wake up at certain time. That will
Right.
be developed with time, because that's
Mhm.
a maturity situation, cognitive levels. And that's
Right.
why a lot of kids don't do well either, you know? Like you're thinking about it, it's like, wow, that this kid is not. So you just have to form your own rhythm at home And that's something that I think is so loving and compassionate with ourselves too, because sometimes we are thinking like, no, I'm failing, I'm not doing it. But I'm like, no, it's maybe you need to change your own rhythm and slow down and kind of like really think what works for you. And sometimes,
like
yeah.
some people, maybe you're a morning person and maybe your kids are. A lot of people aren't. Maybe so you might want to switch things up. Like you might want to do your heavy work in the afternoon if that works better for your family. For us, for example, I've noticed our tendency was to leave the big stuff towards the evening because I would give my kids a lot of freedom in choosing when they, like I usually give them a checklist and they decide what they want to do first. And that didn't really work well, especially for the younger ones. They needed a little more help in that because they would leave everything towards the end. So I found that the rhythm for our family, it is better to get the big stuff out of the way in the morning. And then the afternoon could be for stuff that's more fun for us. Like I love history, they love science. So I tend to do those in the afternoons because that's when they have more trouble concentrating. So they're more interested in those subjects. So it's a little easier. But every family is different. I know somebody else that her husband works different hours. And so when he's home during the day, they want to spend time with him. So they do their schoolwork in the evenings. Well, that's fine. I mean, it's all about, like you said, finding the rhythm that works for your family. And especially, it is an issue with maturity with kids about when they're going to do the work and how well, but you can kind of find ways to gently redirect that and help them grow into that developmentally.
And I also want to mention that because that's another thing that, I have heard a lot, especially at these times of COVID. Like how many people tell me, well, but I am a single mom or single parent and I want to do this, but I don't think I can because, like I have to work either from home or, and I just want to encourage, like, like I have heard of, situations where few families get together and they collaborate. You will have to find your community to do this. It's not, like you're gonna find it. But we mentioned like going online, for example, on Facebook. There are many Facebook groups right now where you can find like-minded families and try to find people in your area. Of course, I will always say, like be sure they're safe. And that's a plus. But if you happen to have family, if you happen to have good friends in your neighborhood, looking into those possibilities of perhaps like getting together and do those things together, I think that's exciting. And it could be a shared effort for the community, and that's something that I think we are reevaluating. At least I am reevaluating as like so much at this time in humanity in general. Like we need to go back to feeling more as a group rather than just an individual all the time. And I think, the kids can also benefit from that because they can have different mentors and different role models, not only you. And I love that, about having my children involved in different groups rather than just having one group. But I wanted to go over all the different types of homeschooling. There is another one that is called life skill schooling. And I was mentioning that is very similar to the Montessori style of learning, which makes a lot of emphasis, in the development of children and with their responsibilities, their own autonomy, how to take care of things around the house, how to take care of their own bodies. And it's a beautiful way that you can set up, especially for younger children. I realize that it's a really beautiful and wonderful way to start teaching them around the house. And there are many ways
they love it. I mean, I found that with my kids, especially when they're really young. That's like one thing that people always talk about with toddlers and preschoolers. They always want to help, and moms roll their eyes like, oh, I just want to get it done, get out of the kitchen. But if you take time to do it with them and to really teach them when they're young, when they're so excited about it, those habits stay with them. And I've also noticed, because it's all about doing meaningful work, not just giving them something like their little toy broom just so they will be occupied, but really helping them be a part of the household, is it gives them such a sense of purpose and belonging. that they can say, wow, I really did that. I'm helping out with the household, and they really feel so proud of themselves because of doing that. I just had that happen just the other day with my 7-year-old when, you know, he helps me in the kitchen and cleaning the dishes, and I pulled out something to use that he had put away, and he was like, oh, that's this what I just put away, and now we're using it. I mean, it was like this real light bulb moment for him to see how he was really contributing to the household. I mean, it was kind of a small moment, but that makes them feel really proud of themselves.
Yes, and I have to mention, you know, like I've been really in love with Montessori for many years. I even went to some of their conferences, and Montessori has like all these steps, you know, like children need to master these steps in order to do. And you know, at the beginning I was like, why is so much, you know, like trouble about, you know, all these steps, you know? And then I realized it's like, yes, little minds, because of their cognitive levels, do need steps. You know, like some of the tasks are not as easy to really understand all the time if you don't do it by little steps. And I love it. I think it's a great way to also teach math, especially in the earlier years. So because there's a lot of manipulative stuff, like they can, you know, use different things. And you don't have to spend an arm or a leg, you know, like buying materials. Like you can also learn how to use things that are available to you to do those things at home. So that is one of the modalities that you can definitely do at home. There is the other one that we were talking about is Waldorf, and I really, you know, like that's something that we did enjoyed. I think there's so many beautiful things that we can learn from Waldorf communities. But I think, you know, that's also another thing that, you know, like cannot be for everyone. But they make a lot of emphasis of, you know, like not digital learning, hands-on, and also respecting every child's time to be ready, especially with the reading. They don't do reading early on. They just wait until the child is completely ready to start reading. And that I think is wonderful, you know, like for so many parents that are worried, you know, like for their 3-year-old to start learning reading. and I wonder, you know, like, I mean, every family is different. But I think it's also the pressure of society. Like we are kind of expecting all children to be at the same level suddenly when everybody's so different. So, and that's something so difficult for us to understand, like what is really about the pressure that I'm feeling as a parent versus what do my child need.
And just to follow on about that, about the reading and writing, there are a lot of studies that show that it really damages kind of children's self-esteem when they're pressured to do reading and writing before they're ready. And no matter when kids start reading and writing, usually by the later years, like 4th and 5th grade, it evens out. So those kids that start reading at 3 versus the ones that start at 6 or 7, it all evens out when they get older. The levels, you know, one is not going to may not stay really advanced. It all works its way out. You know, they, like you say, they just have their own time of doing it. And you can do a lot of other activities that will help get them ready for it without pressuring them. Especially like writing. Also, a lot of times we just have this tendency to think that earlier is better, and it isn't necessarily. The early years really should be so much about play and discovery, and not necessarily sitting and writing. Just physically, even their hands aren't necessarily ready to pick up a pencil and write. So, you know, there are lots of other things you can do, like play.
The pressure of society, even sometimes our own families, you know, like so-and-so is already writing, so-and-so is already reading. And then you're thinking, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with my child. Like this is coming from a mom whose child, you know, like was like having speech issues. And I remember, you know, how many times people would say, oh, if your child doesn't talk. And I'm like, you know, in my mind, it's like, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. Like maybe I shouldn't have speak to him in Spanish, because that's the first thing they say to me when I went to speak to pathologists, and which, by the way, is a lie. People, it's a lie. Anyways, but that's why I say we need to really know what are we acting on upon our children, because we're feeling pressure rather than advocating for each of our children. And how many times have I had this conversation even with teachers, and the same teacher tells me in my face, is like, I know this, it's just that the curriculum and the standards say that your child needs to do this, and I don't agree, but I have to enforce it. And I wonder how many parents are out there, who have received, or their child is not doing well, like performing at the level. And when in reality, these things are just a made up standard by a bunch of who knows, because seriously, I don't even know who gives these standards to children. And
a lot of times we're not educators. I mean, a lot of times the people who are making the decisions are more political, right?
Yeah, like what we're seeing right now is a shame. I mean, like people who are not even educators themselves are telling teachers what to do. But bottom line, like, why are we doing this to our children? Like, our children will learn at their own pace if you do offer opportunities for them to learn.
Right.
And that's why we're giving different modalities. You can do either the game schooling, the nature schooling, the self-directed, the unschooling. There's another modality that I have found out that is very popular at these times. It's called Charlotte Mason, and it's based on classical literature and living books. And the child will read these books and like create their own living book based on that literature. And you can find out more about it. I actually I forgot the name, but I do follow some accounts on Instagram that they do that modality in Spanish. And
there's one for the love of Spanish. She has a whole program that you can join in. It's a Facebook group, and she puts up resources, and it's based on Charlotte Mason as a method of teaching Spanish.
There you go. So you can see that you can also do either of these modalities in other languages. That's another wonderful opportunity for parents that do speak other languages, or they feel comfortable, because seriously, at this moment, we are having like parents that are not native speakers of other languages that are teaching their children other languages, like Liana. Liana is not a native speaker of Spanish, but she does teach Spanish to her children. So, and I have other.
You can even find curriculum out there, even if you don't speak Spanish, that they've set it up so that you can listen to the audio, you can follow it online. So you can find research, or there are online programs where you can use it. This is a great time because, again, foreign languages, the arts, these are recreation, these are all things that are getting pushed to the side in traditional and public schools that you can really tap into now that your kids are home, or teach them. If you're from another culture, you could teach them about your culture, your heritage, or explore other cultures. That's something we try to do a lot also. Or focus on justice issues. I mean, there's so many reasons that people want to homeschool that you can like really think out of the box. What do you really want your kids to be learning? How can you take advantage of this time that they're home to teach them things that are really important to you? Or maybe it's your religion. We're Baha'is, other people there. There's a lot out there for Christian homeschoolers, Muslim, Jewish. You can think about what your goals are and what your values are that you want to teach your children. And there's definitely a Facebook group for it. There are Facebook groups for everything. There's a group for Baha'i homeschoolers. There's everything.
Yesterday, I also said that, that's something that I in the past, I had always kind of like been concerned, especially with homeschoolers, is that sometimes it becomes like a silo, they think, oh, I'm doing only this modality, and I will always say, yes, that's great that you're doing that, but also remember to expose children to other ways of living, other cultures, other beliefs. Because even if you're teaching your child, like in the Christian, curriculum, also, remember that the majority of people in the world are not sharing your same point of view, and that's also teaching critical thinking. That's
Right.
one of the reasons I'm very strong about teaching children about world religions and different cultures.
Mhm. Right.
Because you need to decenter yourself in order to really have compassion for others. And that's something that has to start from child. Otherwise your entire
Right.
universe and entire perspective becomes very poor. Because
Mhm.
that's seriously, if you only have one perspective and that's all you have and your tool belt,
Right.
you're robbing your children from that, and that's actually another argument for languages for sure. Like I feel like if you don't expose your children to other languages,
Mhm.
it's robbing your children from other ways to see the world and other types
Right.
of understanding. Because I can assure you, like it's so enriching. And sometimes my kids, post to me like, I don't understand why you make so much, like why do I have to learn this? So and so doesn't. And I'm like, because you will be thankful in the future. And I can assure you 100% you will be thankful. Like you will be older and you will be telling me, Mom, thank you so much for pushing Japanese in my life, or French, or Spanish. Like those are the languages that we're doing at this moment at my home. And sometimes they look at me like, why are we doing this? Like nobody
Right.
speaks this language. I'm like, you will be thanking me in the future, because I can assure you, you will be like exposed to things in a different way. And even
Right.
but just by the sake of your child knowing that
Right.
there's another culture, an
Right.
entire set of ideas and beliefs different than yours, all that.
Right. Like we recently got a book to review. I do a lot of book reviews on the website. We got one from Dr. Edna Ma, and it's in English and Chinese. Well, we don't speak Chinese, but my kids loved the book, and I loved exposing just for them to even think, wow, you can have a language where they use a totally different way of writing, and it also has it in I don't know how you say it, pinyin, where you can it's written
Oh
in
yeah.
Roman letter and our
Yeah.
alphabet, so they could try and pronounce it. I mean, just even knowing, like you say, knowing their different ways of seeing the world and talking and being. And to go back to your point, you and I are both really involved in interfaith activities, which I think is so important. It doesn't take away from what you're teaching your children. You can teach them and you can share your beliefs with them. It doesn't diminish that to talk to have respectfully understand other people's beliefs. You can see what you have in common, what you don't have in common. You can do that without it. I think some people are afraid to expose their kids to other religions because they think, oh, I don't want to confuse them. Well, it's not confusing if you're showing them how to be respectful and finding points of unity with people who may seem very different. I think like you said, that's a great lesson to teach your children, and it doesn't take away from the values that you're sharing with them. In fact, it's emphasizing the value of respect and of seeing everyone as God's children, or, whatever your perspective is. It's not going to take away from them.
Yeah, that's something that I invite everybody, kind of like exploring on their own. And I love people who are respectful of that. Uh,
Right.
it's just that that's something, if you do choose to do homeschooling, you do need to be aware of that, because like that's another of the things that I wanted to say. Like even as homeschoolers, we have the responsibility and the obligation to advocate for children who are in public schools, who do not have access, neither the privilege to do homeschooling. Because bottom line, all the schools are important, and all the children are important. That's, like, because we are all in the same communities. So
Right.
that's something that I think, bottom line, we can teach our next generations just by doing. Because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
parents say, like, no, you just have to be nice and you just have to do this. And we talk and talk and talk. But we forget that the children learn from us doing. So if we
Right.
say to our children, yes, be nice, but they're looking at us and we're like, like being prejudiced or, having
Right.
bias, children know all these. And, now that I have a teenager, she's very critical of me. And, sometimes as a parent, it's hard. But I have to say, is really useful as a parent and as a person to grow, to realize that, yes, my child is indeed looking at me. It's indeed watching out what I'm doing. And if I'm upholding my values or what I say I value in real life. So we need to come and pay attention, because that's something that we need to cherish. Like, especially now with COVID, like a lot of more parents have more time with their children. Like, before that, like a lot of parents won't have as much time with their children because they were busy outside of the house, or
Right.
and many people were complaining. I get it. I get it 100%. But we also need to see the blessing on that. And the blessing is that we have so many more opportunities to model things for our children and to grow together. They make us grow and we make them grow. So it's a two-way relationship. And I love it. I think it's so. The other modality, that I was gonna mention is like they have the virtual schools. So virtual schools are like schools that you can do online the same way you do public school online, but there are schools that are the entire curriculum is online. So you can do either the homeschooling modality or the entire curriculum online. And I don't know if in California is the case, but here in Florida it's free. It's tuition free. Every family can have access to that.
Great.
So it's covered. And the other part of our conversation yesterday that I wanted to talk to parents or caretakers today about, if you do look to start doing homeschooling for your children, or children in your care, at least in South Florida and in the place where I am now, the first step you need to do is like you need to de-escalate. That word.
Like unenrolled?
Yes. But like, think about, like the kids are going to learn in a different way. So it's not going to be like it used to be. And you need to send an email or a letter to your local school board and let them know that you will be doing homeschooling. And if, like in the case of my children who were enrolled last year in the public school, I had to notify both of their schools that this year my children were going to do homeschooling. And that is to prevent any problems, because in the state of Florida, and I'm pretty sure in every state, you cannot keep children at home without any school. So you are committing to be pretty much the director of the schools of your child when you're choosing to do homeschooling. In the state of Florida, what is required is pretty simple. You do need to kind of, keep track. It could be a digital form or, in the actual form of, some of the projects and curriculums that you're doing with your children, or either be certified yearly by a certified teacher in the state. We talk about the umbrella schools, which are homeschooling cooperatives where you can also be enrolled with and do your homeschooling under them. Sometimes they require attendance. Like you will have to go to this website every day and check, like you did a school that day. That is another thing, but that is in the case of Florida. Every state has their own rules on that. I was mentioning that from what I understand, in the state of Georgia, for example, you need to ask for permission and be given permission by the state in order for you to do homeschooling before you can do homeschooling. So I don't know, do you want to share with us how it's in your state?
Yes, and just to underscore what you were saying, I mean, you really need to research what the process is in your locality and what you need to do if your kids are currently enrolled in a school, what you need to do to unenroll them. In our case, my kids were never enrolled in a school, so it was a little bit different. But every place is different and it changes. So I really recommend if you can to network with local homeschooling families, because that's a great way to stay on top of things. Like in California, there's a lot of legislation that's been coming up for debate that changes how we're doing things. So you want to stay, especially everything during the pandemic is everything's changing all the time, what the regulations are, because they see how many people are turning to homeschooling. But in any case, here currently, you can do the alternative, like Mama Tortuga was talking about, where you basically are declaring that you're the principal of your school and you're in charge of your students who are your children or the children you're caretaking for. You can do that, and in that case, I think the paperwork is very minimal, and the requirements are minimal. But in California, if you're under one of these umbrella schools, which in our case is a charter school, that's what we're doing, which I really love because it gives you a lot of support. You have an automatic community of other families. We have certified teachers that we work with that know our families very well, that our kids love and feel comfortable with, and they can make a lot of recommendations. I can call them up or text. I can text her anytime or call her, and she is always available to talk me through whatever we're going on, whatever's going on with us, whether it's the curriculum or I just need some advice on how to get my child to focus, and whatever the case may be, sibling rivalry. They're really, she's so wonderful working with us. So I like that alternative. We do have more paperwork. I have to keep lesson plans for what we do every day and submit those every month. We have to submit work samples. So there's more paperwork involved, although they try to make that as painless as possible. But the exchange for that is we get budget money that we can use to buy our books and curriculum. I can use for classes or field trips, which really makes it much more possible for us. You don't have to have a lot of money or spend a lot of money to do homeschooling. That's kind of a misconception. There are also a lot of websites or groups you can find where you can get curriculum for free or get it used from other parents. There are a lot of alternatives, but it is really nice if you have money to spend on it. And so in California, that's an option that really has made it so much easier for us. And like I said, it's also a form of support. So if you can, we were talking before about the homeschooling groups on Facebook do unfortunately have a tendency to
Liana,
not be very
we have
supportive.
like a few seconds remaining.
So I recommend try to
Do you
network with
want
other
to
homeschoolers.
cut it and start all over again, because I think we're leaving out some things and I want to finish it.
Okay, sure. Okay.
So we're gonna cut and we're gonna come back and